Today I want to talk about language and how language impacts the way that we talk about the issue of gender-based violence, or domestic violence is what they usually call it here in the United States. So let's talk about three potential issues with how language is used in the issue of domestic violence. And then we'll talk about three possible solutions. So issue number one is that oftentimes when issues of domestic violence are reported, they are reported in a way that uses statistics and focuses on the victim first. It doesn't focus on who the perpetrator was or how the act was committed. So, for example, in the issue of rape, we might report that X number of women were raped every year. Now, this puts the focus of the act of rape, the crime that was committed, on the woman who was victimized. But it takes the focus away from the actual perpetrator of that violence. In over 90% of these cases, men are the ones who are committing these acts of violence against women. And by not looking at the issue in that way, we are taking the blame away from men and we're allowing them to hide behind that statistic. We're also giving them an opportunity to not focus on that issue themselves and take responsibility for it, and take responsibility as a society for changing the mentality that we've created that allows so many men to commit acts of rape or other types of violence against women. So the way that we word that language is very important in how we construct that issue in our mind. Issue number two is the idea of calling someone who has had a crime put against them, committed against them, an accuser. So this puts the focus on the accuser versus the person who's being accused, and it allows us to dehumanize the person who is called the accuser and also put them in a position where we are not really looking at the crime itself, but we're looking at them as somebody who is posing an accusation as opposed to someone who has actually been harmed, who has been victimized in this terrible crime. So in the book, The Macho Paradox, the author talks about the Kobe Bryant rape trial and how, although there was ample evidence to talk about how Kobe had committed an act of rape against this woman, the woman was labeled as an accuser, and that allowed the defendants and their attorneys to focus in on the types of accusations that were filed against her, to dehumanize her, to start looking for evidence of misconduct in her past life that really turned the public eye away from the crime that had been committed and towards this accuser, this inhuman person who could then be tarnished reputation-wise, who could take the issue away from the actual crime that was committed. And by focusing on Kobe as an actual person, as a fully fledged human, they were able to build up his legacy, his rapport with the people, with the basketball community, and really take the public eye away from the actual issue that was being discussed and that had allegedly been committed. So in the end, this is something that happens very often. If someone reports an issue to the police or to the authorities, they are often going to be they're going to have this label of accuser put on them. And I think what that does is it not only takes the focus away from them and the crime that was committed and puts it, and again, kind of shrouds them in this mystery and puts this label on them that doesn't have a necessarily, positive meaning to it. But it also, I think, discourages people from stepping forward and talking about the crimes that have been committed. Many crimes of violence or rape are never reported, and part of this is because of this fear that they won't be taken seriously, that they'll be blamed as the victim, and that the crime will go unpunished. And a lot of that comes down to how we word the situation that they're reporting. If they're reported as an accuser, and they are not taken seriously because of that, or they're seen in a negative light because of that, because accuser may have a negative connotation to it, then they may not feel like they should report the issues that have happened to them because they may not get a fair trial because of it. So the way that we talk about wording in that way really makes a big difference to creating an environment of safety in which people can come forward. Okay, issue number 3 is the issue of normalizing male behavior that is violent. So you often hear the term, boys will be boys. We heard this a lot in the Donald Trump scandal, where he talked about basically abusing a woman. And what everybody said is, oh, that's just locker room talk. Oh, boys will be boys. Well, in fact, what the term boys will be boys does is it normalizes acts of violence against women. It normalizes sexual assault, and it says that boys are defined by their violence, by their ability to create violence, and it kind of presupposes that you as a boy are biologically predetermined to be a violent human being, to be someone who's violent, to be someone who takes advantage of women, to be someone who uses their power in an abusive way. And I really think that that's unfair to boys. I think that boys should be championed. I really think that boys should be given a different model of behavior by society. When we presuppose that boys are going to be violent, that they are going to abuse women, that they are going to commit acts that we as a society don't deem as acceptable, but we brush off because boys will be boys, because it's normalized in male behavior to be violent or to take out your aggression or emotions in a violent way, then all we do is set the standard very low for boys to act in a violent way later on. We also encourage them, even unconsciously, to commit acts of violence against other people because it's become so normalized in our society, we think that it's okay, and we brush it off. So those are 3 different issues that come from the way that we language things around this issue. Let's talk about 3 quick solutions. So solution number 1 is for journalists in the media in general to start looking at these issues in the way that they report them and start putting the focus more on the perpetrators and talking about this issue in society as something that we could all work on and change. So again, with the issue of rape, where we say X number of women were raped, maybe we could change that wording in the media to focus more on the perpetrator, talk about this as an issue where we have X number of men raping women every year. Why is that happening? Can we talk about it as a society and work towards solving it? That starts with the language and the way we report those issues. Okay, number 2 is we can get rid of the term accuser in the media and start talking about the victims as whole people. Now, a lot of this comes down to anonymity, of course, but eventually these names and people are going to be known to the public. And so I think when that happens, we need to start building a whole picture of who they are and also creating a safe space in the community for people to step forward and report violence. It needs to become normalized to talk about these issues and to talk about how serious of an issue it is when somebody can't come forward because they're afraid that they'll be victim blamed or status in society is going to be tarnished, simply because something terrible happened to them and they want to talk about it and get justice. Number 3 is that we can start teaching our children and boys what boys will be boys should actually mean. We can start talking about a different ideal of masculinity and manhood and explain to boys that behavior like sexual assault, violence against women, even talking about women in a negative way is not allowed. And it's not what it means to be a man. Being a man can mean being in touch with your emotions, stepping outside of the man box, and taking a stand as an ally for women, both in your own life and in the lives of others. I think this is really important, and this kind of education, this social emotional learning, this teaching about how to be in touch with your emotions and to understand how you as a man should relate to women is crucial to building a society where we teach our children respect, and that blends into how they act as adults. That's all for today. Thank you very much.